All right, surprise, everybody. We are back for Season 3 of the Path Podcast. I am Jason.
Hey there, I'm Derrick.
And we are so glad that you have decided to join us on the Path. And today, as this is our kickoff episode of Season 3, we just want to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, let you know what's going to be coming in the months ahead. We got some really cool stuff on tap for this season. We're learning as we go, and so it's we had season 1, which was great. We learned some things. We had season 2, which was great again. We learned some things. This season is going to be sort of a meshing of those two things and a melding and version 3.0, if you will, version 3.0. And so it's exciting. We got some really cool things coming up. But Derrick, why don't you just start by first off just kind of telling people what's sort of the basic idea, if somebody's maybe tuning in for the first time, what's the basic idea of what we're doing here?
So we started this a year ago. We started this podcast a year ago. We were doing a sermon series entitled The Path. Yeah. And we were looking at the path to the cross, right? The path to Easter, to Easter Sunday. And so we walked literally the last days of Jesus in the book of John for 12 weeks. And in the middle of that, the beginning of that, we planned it. We got ready for it. And what we did not get ready for was the impact it would have because of the pandemic. Yeah. And so we ended up doing the first season through the second series.
Yeah, it ended up being like 19 episodes.
Yeah, it was like
season 1.
Yeah. So, and then in the fall, we did another series, a family series that we continued the path on season 2. Yeah. And so here we are a year later. We are getting ready for Easter again. It's something you do in church ministry.
Believe it or not, it comes every year.
You're getting ready for Sunday every week, and then every year you're getting ready for Easter.
That's right.
It's not the only thing, but
those are the tent poles.
One of the big ones. So. And so we intentionally are doing a series in Galatians. Galatians helps us see the freedom that we have in Christ. And I think it's a great lead-in to Easter again, because we'll see again on Easter that what Christ did to accomplish that freedom, not only dying on the cross, but rising from the dead, and the pinnacle of Christianity, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that's how we have our freedom, right? So that's why Paul could write Galatians and address the issues that church was facing. So I'm excited about that, and kind of a surprise series or a surprise podcast season. We had planned to do another podcast season very soon, but we really wanted it to correlate with that message series. And that's what you kind of said, we're going to mesh season 1 and season 2. Season 1 was strictly, I preached Sunday, we kind of discussed it the next day and aired that.
Driven by our sermon series.
It really was. And the second series, the second series was somewhat driven by that, or loosely driven by that. But it was much more like, let's look at some life principles and those kind of things. And we had some more interviews, which we didn't have the first season much. And so, it was good. It was helpful. And then we kind of heard some feedback about how some people really enjoyed, like the Sunday sermon was like for everyone. And then like the podcast was really for me to kind of dive in and dig into like, hey, how do I apply the scripture? Yeah. That's something I really like is continuity. Yeah. Like with what we're teaching, I want to teach things that are like driving you to a similar point or the same point, right? Number one, it's easier to prepare for because everything kind of hones in on that one thing. And then people are more apt to retain knowledge with repetition. That's something you learn in education, teaching, learning how to be an educator, learning how to be someone who teaches someone. So we want to add that repetition, not necessarily the same content over and over again. That becomes mundane and boring, but corresponding content that kind of helps. And so there's going to be an aspect of that kind of we'll talk about what was the one or maybe two takeaways from
big takeaway,
or handles that you can kind of hold on to this week with that, and we'll talk about that in just a moment about yesterday's message for just a moment. But then we're also going to do some other things. Share with us some of the ideas that we've kind of. We don't have this fully hashed out yet, but some of the ideas that we have for topics for this season.
Yeah, for sure. So we really want to help you understand, like as we are a couple of your pastors, we want to help you understand that life is very much about, you have to have a strong theology, you have to have sound doctrine, but you also need to have fun as well. God or Jesus tells us in the Gospels that He came to give us life and that we would have it to the full.
Right.
And part of that is enjoying life. And so we're gonna dive deep. We have a couple episodes where we're gonna dive deep on some theology topics that are kind of things that a lot of people tend to have questions about, or maybe they're misunderstood from Scripture a lot of times. So we're gonna look at those kind of things. But then we're also gonna have just some fun interviews. Like we thought this could end up being dangerous, but we thought it would be fun to interview our wives.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fun.
Yes.
Probably not too incriminating, but we're going to interview our wives. We thought it'd be fun to talk to you about sort of our favorite worship songs and why they're our favorite worship songs. We got a lot of really good feedback on our cooking episode last season, and so we're going to have maybe another one of those, which was a lot of fun. But then just looking at passages that are some of our favorite passages from the Old Testament, some of our favorite passages from the New Testament, and then maybe just looking at what are some dreams that we have as your pastors for the church here at Lafayette. But all of those things interweaving with what are some takeaways each week from the sermon, and so I think it'll be fun to sort of see that interplay and see how the Spirit moves in our thought process as we discuss.
Some of the other things we've thought about too is even more possibly incriminating is interviewing our children.
That's right.
And then also we would love to get to talk to some of our church members. Yeah. And I particularly like the idea of it being some of the folks that have been here for a very long time. Part of this church. What are some milestone events you remember, what kind of help us understand and appreciate the history of our church. I think you can't build a future unless you know the history and appreciate the history. And so as we seek to build a future, I hope and pray is bigger and better than it's ever been for Lafayette First. I want to kind of remember, I've heard stories, but I'd love to sit down with some folks, interview, about the golden years of the from what I can tell, kind of when the church was the hoppingest,
right,
was around the 70s, and,
for sure,
and but other times as well. I'd love to hear those stories. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and it's also too that this is not just and we've said this before, it's not just us talking to each other in a room. We really want to involve you, and we want you to be a part of what we're doing here, and that's why we ask you every week to interact with us. That's why we ask you to send us emails or questions, and that's why we started adding more interviews so that we can get our church members involved in this, because this is really it's a process for all of us,
right?
And so we'd love for more people to be involved, and we're gonna figure out ways that we can do that over the weeks ahead. But so all really exciting things that we can hopefully you look forward to in the weeks ahead as we go through season 3. But so let's just for a couple of minutes, let's talk about yesterday as we started this series through the book of Galatians. Kind of what is as you really we talked about that it's sort of this Paul starts from a position that's a little different from all of his other letters, and it's not so cordial as many of the other letters are. Let's put it that way. But what's a couple of handles that we can hold on to this week as we think about Galatians chapter 1?
Yeah, let me first just say I find that fascinating. I don't know. I mean, you kind of project things onto biblical characters that may not be true. It's totally extra biblical.
Sure.
I don't think it's heresy, but
Right.
it's just like trying to understand the position.
Yeah.
And if you think about, like, Paul's invested in these Christians' lives, man. I mean, he's got a big burden for them, which, and I can understand that from a leadership position.
Yeah.
Even churches I once was at, there's still a burden there, even though I'm here, and then I'm, of course, most burdened for the members that are here. And so I understand where Paul's coming from, and he's heard, like, that this church is slipping, right? And so I kind of see him, like, if he's to walk up in that building or wherever they're meeting, I kind of see, like, the gunslinger scene, right, where he like the old westerns, he just throws open, exactly, exactly, and he's like, "What's happening here?" Like, what are y'all doing? And then he's gotten word back that, like, even these Judaizers are questioning his apostleship, and so I can understand that, man, and he goes in reestablishing what he established to begin with, that Christ is enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
For us, Christ is enough for our salvation, but for our sanctification, Christ and his work, his salvific work, his sanctifying work in our lives, is all we need. We don't need, and what we'll find in weeks to come, particularly, they're so hung up on circumcision. I don't get that, because number one, I'm not a Middle Eastern Jew from
the first
that
century.
age. But these are Gentiles.
Yeah.
Galatia, these are Gentiles that had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And these people who were like Jews and kind of like quasi Christians, probably members of some church or something, some faction that, kind of deviated off and started their own sect in their own way. Come in and say, no, you can't do that. You have to, you guys are Greeks.
Yeah.
You're Gentiles. You've not been circumcised. You got to be circumcised.
Yeah.
And people don't know if this is or scholars are not quite sure when this was written. Was it pre-Jerusalem Council, where the church got together with their first, decision?
The apostles got together.
Yeah, the apostles got together, but to represent the whole universal church, and said, no, let's don't put a yoke upon these Gentiles that doesn't matter and doesn't make it, makes it harder for them to trust Christ and follow Christ. That could have been, this could have happened previous to that, or it could have happened after. I kind of think it was just pervasive, even though the church and the apostles kind of said, no, this is it.
Yeah.
I think it just was pervasive and kept going. And Paul's addressing it to say, you guys are sadly mistaken. This is not the thing. So all that to say, not to rehash what we talked about yesterday, we've got to get to the point where we realize, if we want to grow spiritually, if we want to be sanctified, if we want to know the freedom that we have, if we want to be passionate and zealous in our faith, we need to know Christ more.
Yeah.
There's not some, like, magical potion that we can, like, there's not, there is no, some will say, well, the cross is great, but then I want more depth in that. There is nothing deeper than the fact that Jesus died on the cross, and accomplished what we can never accomplish. That we don't have to add to that. And so I would just say that, number one, for us Christians, that we want to grow in our faith, what we need to learn and understand more is that we need Christ more.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great point, that a lot of times people feel like, yeah, no. I got the gospel and the cross thing. I'm ready for the next thing. I was like, no. That is the thing. That's the thing. It's not like you started here and then you moved to the deeper stuff. No, this is the thing. And I think that a lot of times we do ourselves a disservice by thinking that we fully understand that. Because if we fully understood that, we wouldn't be pining for something more.
Right.
And really the only thing that we need to pine for more of is Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's not a deeper understanding of. Now, don't get me wrong. We need to study theology. We need to study Scripture, but we do that as a means to an end of knowing Jesus more. Right. And it's not that no, Jesus, I got you, man. Let me study the Bible now. It's all of that serves to point back to Jesus all the more. So,
yeah, the Pharisees struggled with this.
Yeah.
That's why Jesus said, "You're like whitewashed sepulchres." You're tombs.
Yeah.
You're ornate.
Yeah, on the outside.
On the outside, but death is inside of you. We can be really good at making ourselves appear prim, proper, and polished.
Yeah.
But it's the depth of our heart that needs to change, and only Christ can change that.
Right.
I can change my outward appearance. I can. To use the text, I could get circumcised, and what Paul says in other places is that is your heart circumcised? That's that's the point of this, and what that means is that Christ has changed your heart. You haven't changed your appearance or your outward, something on the outside. You can even mutilate your flesh is basically what Paul will say. And still be in bondage. Yeah. To use what we talked about yesterday. Yeah. That's not the point. You have to trust Christ. Christ will free you. Yeah. And I think it's important for church people to hear. That's important for me to hear. It's very easy to get in a rut of like I can, and really it comes down to legalism. Yep. I didn't mention that yesterday. It's just hard because number one, legalism has baggage. Just even saying a word, you have to explain it. Yeah. But it really comes down to the fact of there are people that believe you have to do a list of things to receive Christ's favor or God's favor. Yeah. When Christ accomplished all those things for us. And then we do some of those religious things, religious acts. But it's exactly like you said. It's a means to an end of knowing Christ more.
Yeah, I was going to say it goes right back to our previous point that shows how much we haven't grasped the gospel yet. The thing that we look at as the doorway, which is actually the room that we're supposed to be in.
That's right.
And the fact that we continue to try to, well, let me do better, let me work harder, let me do these things, and then Jesus will be happy with me. Yeah. Then God will be pleased. And that's a fruitless pursuit because you're never going to do enough to make God happy. So I loved what you said yesterday, that you made the distinction that for a lot of us, especially as people who've grown up in the church, when you hear the word bondage, you think of things like drugs and alcohol or pornography or list off all the sins that you want to list off. We never think about religious pursuits or Pharisaical viewing of how I live my life. And that is also bondage as well, because you are binding yourself by saying, no, I love Jesus, but Jesus is not going to be happy with me unless I do this. That's a servitude that Jesus has set us free from.
And I would say it's bondage of a worser kind.
I totally would agree, because you don't think you're in bondage.
Yeah.
Most people who are alcohol or drug addicts or pornography
addicts,
know it's
wrong.
They know it's wrong, but they still continue to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas these, for people in the church, it's, oh no, I'm doing the right thing here. I'm at church. I'm doing the stuff, so I'm not in bondage. I'm just doing my thing.
The difference between the two is, in a lot of times, substances or pornographic content or whatever that bondage is, oftentimes it's an outside source that's shackling you. Where religious pursuit is, I'm going to put my own shackles on.
Yeah. I'm going to go grab the shackles and put them on myself. Yeah.
And I'm in total self-denial. And this is why I can understand that. I can understand where Paul's coming from. I grew up in a Christian home. I've except for some communion wine, I've never tasted alcohol.
Yeah.
I was never, never tried any kind of drugs. I smoked a cigarette once and coughed my lungs out. I was this kid that was just a goody two shoes, right? I was, and I was in college. Didn't even have to tell people I was religious. I had a guy come up to me and says, "Hey, you're a pretty pious guy, right?" I'm like, "Dude, I barely even know you. How do you know that?" Right. But I think it's because like I just towed the line and kept all the rules. But guess what? That was a bondage for me.
Yeah, sure.
That was a bondage I created on my own and said, well, look at me. I'm better than this, that, or whatever. When really my sin was just as bad. In fact, as Jesus pointed out so many times with Pharisees, you're dead on the inside. And nothing was changing for me there. Though I trusted Christ at a young age, I was relying upon my own self-righteousness. Yeah. And so God revealed that to me several years ago and broke me. Yeah. Broke me. And I understand. I think Paul understood that. He knew that he was his religious pursuits. He'll often say, hey, I'm an apostle of the apostles. I'm the Pharisee of the Pharisees.
The Hebrew of Hebrews.
I'm the guy, I did everything, and then I persecuted the church. I was so zealous about it. Yeah. And so I understand that. God, thank goodness God revealed to me the legalism that I so easily wandered into or fell into.
Sure, and I think one of the beauties of the gospel is that the gospel points that out in us. That hey, you can't do this. Yeah, and so that's why like my mind. This is probably not the way I should look at the Bible, but my mind thinks in memes a lot, and it's so my view of that, like that introduction of Galatians is Paul's like, hey, listen, I came in here and I came straight from God to talk to you. Jesus sent me to talk to you. And then it's almost like you hear the Galatians going, oh, Paul, what's wrong, man? You seem like you're upset. And then Paul says, oh, nothing. I just think it's real funny, though, that you guys are turning away from the gospel. Like, it's one of those kind of, like that's the way that lead-in is, because he's like, I'm astonished that you guys are turning away from the thing that I told you about. And I think that it's both an encouragement and a warning to say, hey, listen, you can't do this on your own, but hey, listen, it's real easy to fall into thinking you can. Yeah. And so, which I find so encouraging from Paul's words to say, I can't do this on my own, but Jesus doesn't expect you to do it on your own. Yeah. He gives us the Holy Spirit. He gives us everything we need to be able to do it, but we can't do it on our own. Yeah.
I love that you said the gospel. We think the gospel is the door when really the gospel is the room. Yeah. And I would even add, with volume after volume of volume.
Yeah, absolutely.
Books, right. And stories and beautiful novels. It's just something you could just sit in all day long and for years and never scratch the surface of all that is there. Yeah. And the depth that is there, and so, I don't think that's a thing we'll know fully till we see Jesus face to face, and we'll just be like,
wow, I woefully sold this short, but oh my gosh,
my goodness, thank you, and
exactly.
So, but we can experience that today, and I don't think we do because we religiousized. There's a word, but
it is now.
We've religiousized everything so much, that you in certain circles, oh, you're raising your hands, oh, you're a charismatic, so you can't do that. It's
we don't do that here. Yeah. Or in other hands, why don't you have your hands raised? Yeah. In other.
Well, rings, and it's like no, where's your heart? I don't care about what's on the outside. Yeah, because somebody can be in the room, running up and down the aisles, sure, and still their heart isn't changed. Yeah, and then if your heart has changed, there's got to be an overflow. Yeah, but I don't think it has to look like what you would think. That's a legalism of another sort.
Yeah, absolutely, it is.
Oh, it should always look this, or it should. No, it's God dealing with me and my heart. In the overflow of that, where is that? And so, you got to experience that freedom first. You got to know what it's like.
Absolutely, I think you're right. Cool. Well, all great things that I think we can take away with. We would love to know: is there anything that stuck out to you in Galatians chapter 1? Maybe you need to read through it again this week and just sort of sit in it and ponder for a little bit. We'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch with us. Remind you again, you can email us at thepath@lafayettefirst.life. Or you can comment on this YouTube video, or you can comment on the podcast, and we can get back in contact with you and all those things. But I, for one, am super excited about season 3. I think it's going to be great. I hope that you're excited too. Don't forget to share the podcast with Facebook, with everything like Facebook or wherever whatever platform you're on. Share it so that we can get the word out there and help more people. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say I have something I would like to request from everyone as well. Yeah. So, definitely please, jump in on, hey, what stood out to you from Galatians 1. But give us some ideas. Like, what would you like to hear about? Like, what kind of content is interesting to you? And that'll help us, even if it's not in season 3, maybe in season 4. So I'd love to hear kind of, hey, I'd love to hear a little bit more about this, or hey, you should interview somebody in this field, or hey, you should do that a fun recipe show again. Whatever you're interested in, we'd love to know and hear and try to deliver on some content that would be interesting to you.
Absolutely. And remember, we're here to serve you, and so we would love to be able to do that in a specific way. If there's something that specifically you need to hear about, we'd love to try to address that.
Absolutely.
But thank you for joining us. I am Jason.
I'm Derrick.
And we look forward to seeing you next time as we continue down the path.